The chairs were empty. When major leaders started skipping G20 summits, the media called it a scheduling conflict, diplomatic tensions, busy calendars. But that's not what it was. It was a declaration, a quiet symbolic announcement that the global system built after World War II is losing its gravitational pull. For decades, these summits were where world leaders gathered to pretend coordination still existed. Ministers would fly in, smile for cameras, sign communiques that nobody would read, and fly home. The illusion was that someone somewhere was still steering the ship. Today, the illusion is cracking, and the empty chairs are just the visible symptom of something much deeper happening beneath the surface of world politics. Hi, I'm your host on Eagle's View, where we cut through the noise and look at what actually moves history. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because we're about to walk through one of the most important transitions happening in your lifetime, the collapse of the old world order and the chaotic birth of whatever comes next. Let's start with a simple question. What are these global summits even for? To understand why the G20 is falling apart, you need to understand what it was built to do. And to understand that, we need to go back to 1944. After World War II, the Allied powers gathered at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to design a new financial system. The world was in ruins. Currencies were unstable. Trade had collapsed. They needed a framework to rebuild. So they created the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and a system where the US dollar became the anchor of global trade backed by gold. This was Bretton Woods 1.0. It worked for about 30 years because the US was the unquestioned financial and industrial center of the planet, and everyone else played along. Europe needed American capital to rebuild, Japan needed American markets, the Soviet bloc was isolated. The system had a clear hierarchy, and the dollar was king. Then, in 1971, Nixon ended the dollar's convertibility to gold. Bretton Woods 1.0 collapsed, but the institutions survived. The IMF, the World Bank, the dollar system itself kept going, now floating on trust and momentum rather than gold backing. And as the global economy grew more interconnected, leaders realized they needed more forums to coordinate. So in 1970s, you had the G3, just the US, Japan, and West Germany, talking about currency policy. By 1975, it became the G6, adding France, the UK, and Italy. Then Canada joined in 1976, making it the G7. These were the major industrialized democracies trying to manage economic crises, oil shocks, and inflation together. In 1997, Russia was invited, and it became the G8. That lasted until 2014 when Russia was kicked out after Crimea. The G7 came back. But by the late 1990s, it was obvious that the G7 alone couldn't manage the global economy anymore. Emerging markets were rising. China, India, Brazil, and others were too big to ignore. So, after the Asian financial crisis in 1997, finance ministers started meeting as the G20. And after the 2008 financial crisis nearly broke the system, the G20 was elevated to a leaders' summit. The idea was get everyone in the room, coordinate fiscal and monetary policy, prevent another Great Depression. That was the theory. The reality? It never really worked. Because by 2008, the system these institutions were built to support was already in terminal decline. Here is what most people miss. The G20 isn't failing because of bad leadership or political drama. It's failing because the underlying architecture it was designed to manage is dissolving. The post-war economic order was built on a few core assumptions. 1. That the US dollar would remain the unquestioned global reserve currency. 2. That open trade under rules written by Western institutions would benefit everyone. 3. That the IMF and World Bank could stabilize crises and enforce discipline. 4. That economic globalization would naturally lead to political convergence. Every single one of these assumptions is now in question. The dollar is still dominant, but it no longer carries the authority it once did. Countries are increasingly trading in their own currencies, building payment systems outside SWIFT, accumulating gold instead of treasury bonds. The IMF can no longer dictate national policy the way it did in the 1980s and 90s. The World Trade Organization can't enforce its own rules when major powers simply ignore them. And the idea that globalization leads to democracy, that illusion died somewhere between Beijing's rise and the 2016 wave of populist revolts across the West. So, when leaders skip the G20, they're not protesting, they're acknowledging irrelevance. These forums can't solve structural problems anymore. They can't prevent crises. They can't coordinate rescue operations. They are theater, and everyone knows it. If you're feeling a knot in your stomach hearing this, that's normal. The world many of us grew up believing in, rules-based, predictable, managed by rational institutions, is fading in real time. And that uncertainty can weigh heavily on our mind. I work as a coach helping people navigate exactly this kind of anxiety, building clarity and resilience when the ground is shifting. We'll come back to that, but first, let's talk about what's actually happening on the ground in different parts of the world. Let's start with a pattern you see across multiple countries: the loss of coherent long-term planning. Take a country like Russia. It's locked in a position where it can't design its own long-term economic program, not because of external sanctions alone, but because of internal contradictions. Different factions inside the state, business elites, security services, all pulling in different directions. No unified vision. And critically, the institutions that once trained competent technocrats and strategic thinkers have degraded. Universities that used to supply intellectual elites capable of managing complex economies are shadows of what they were. So even if there were political will to chart a new course, the institutional capacity to execute it still is weakened. This isn't unique to Russia. Many countries face the same problem. They know the old system is dying, but they lack the internal coherence to build something new. And that creates paralysis. Now, let's look at China. Inside China's political structure, a different kind of struggle is playing out. It's not paralysis. It's a battle over who gets to define the next economic paradigm. Some factions within the Communist Party want deeper global integration, believing China's rise depends on staying enmeshed in Western markets and supply chains. Others want complete autonomy, cutting dependencies and building a self-sufficient economic fortress. This isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign that China's leadership knows the world is entering a new phase, and they must adapt fast. The outcome of these internal debates will shape not just China's future, but the entire Asian region's economic trajectory. Whoever wins this ideological fight inside Beijing will write the program for hundreds of millions of people, and it reflects a broader global reality. Nobody knows what the new rules are yet. The old playbook doesn't work, but the new one hasn't been yet written. Now shift your gaze to the United States. Because while other powers are struggling with internal contradictions, the US is making a calculated pivot. Washington has realized something important. The old system, centered on financial globalization and trade interdependence, is fading. So, instead of trying to preserve it, the US is betting on a different foundation for global influence. Two pillars: energy dominance and AI supremacy. On energy, the transformation is already underway. Advances in shale technology, LNG export capacity, and renewed investment in nuclear power are positioning the US as the world's energy superpower. Europe may need Russian gas. China may need Middle Eastern oil. But the US? It's energy independent and increasingly able to supply allies. That's leverage. On technology, the bet is even bigger. Artificial intelligence and semiconductor dominance give the US control over the infrastructure of the future economy. Whoever leads in AI doesn't just lead in tech. They lead in finance, logistics, surveillance, military capability, everything. And as we covered in a previous video, the US is using chip export controls not just to slow China down, but to make sure American companies remain the gatekeepers of the AI revolution. This is a different kind of power than the Bretton Woods system offered. It's not about coordinating global institutions, it's about controlling the resources and technologies that everyone else depends on. Energy plus compute. That's the new American strategy. Well, my friends, what is AI actually? The AI is a form of energy, electric power that's been converted to something smart, something that can actually converse with us, help us, do some heavy lifting for us. So, what does all this add up to? Global governance mechanisms like the G20 collapse because the system that created them is dissolving. When nations no longer share the same economic model, the same interests, or even the same understanding of what prosperity means, coordination becomes impossible. Instead of one world order, we're watching multiple centers of power emerge, each with its own logic, priorities, and internal contradictions. The US building an energy tech fortress, China navigating between integration and autonomy, Europe caught between American security, dependence, and economic ties to the rest of the world. Regional blocs forming in Asia, Latin America, Africa, each trying to secure their own space in a fragmenting system. And here is the part that affects you directly. When global coordination breaks down, the costs get passed downstream. That means you and me, my friend. Supply chain disruptions, currency volatility, inflation, geopolitical risk premiums baked into everything we buy. The stability you took for granted? That was a byproduct of a system that no longer exists. You might hear people talk about nuclear disarmament or renewed arms control agreements. Don't take it too seriously. When the world order is fragmenting, nobody gives up hard power. The real power now lies in energy security, control over critical technologies, resilient supply chains, and the ability of states to manage their own economic futures without depending on institutions they no longer trust. This brings us to the bigger trend underneath everything, the return of the nation state. For the past 40 years, the story was globalization. Corporations, NGOs, multilateral institutions, they were the rising powers. Governments were supposed to step back, deregulate, let markets and international bodies handle things. Sovereignty was old-fashioned. Borders were obstacles. That era is over. Governments are taking back control. Not because of nationalism or ideology, no, but because when the global system fails, states are the only entities with the capacity and legitimacy to act. Corporations optimize for profit, not survival. NGOs have agendas, not armies. Only states can secure energy, defend territory, manage crises, and enforce order when everything else collapses. So we're entering an age where nations matter again, where borders, sovereignty, and strategic autonomy aren't dirty words, they're survival tools, where these decisions made in the capitals matter more than communiques signed at summits. This isn't necessarily good or bad, it just is. And the sooner you understand it, the better you can navigate it. Now, let's talk about what this means for you. If you're watching this and feeling uneasy, you're not imagining things. The transition we're living through is real, and it's disorienting. The world many people grew up in, globalized, predictable, managed by technocrats who claim to have everything under control, it's fading. And nobody can tell you exactly what replaces it because it hasn't been built yet. That uncertainty creates anxiety. The feeling that the ground is shifting beneath your feet and you can't find stable footing. Geopolitical chaos, economic instability, technological disruption, it all compounds into a sense that the future is unknowable and threatening. But here is the truth. You can't stop the end of an era. You can't prevent the collapse of old institutions or the rise of new power centers. What you can control is your clarity, your sanity, your resilience, and your inner stability. That's why I do this work. Eagle's View exists to give you understanding instead of panic, to help you see the patterns beneath the noise so you're not blindsided by events. And beyond the analysis, I work as a coach, helping people build the mindset and emotional resilience to stay grounded when everything around them is shifting. If geopolitical uncertainty is affecting your peace of mind, and you want guidance rooted in clarity and approach to resilience, there is a link in the description where you can book a call with me. The future belongs to people who understand what's happening, stay calm in the chaos, and adapt faster than the old institutions collapsing around them. So let me leave you with this. The G20 isn't fallen apart because bad diplomacy or personality conflicts. It's fallen apart because the world it was designed to manage no longer exists. The post-war order built on dollar dominance, open trade, and Western institutional supremacy is given way to something messier, more fragmented, and more unpredictable. We're not heading into a new Cold War with clean sides. We're heading into a multipolar scramble, where every region, every country, every bloc is trying to secure its own future in a world where the old rules don't apply anymore. You can't change that, but you can understand it. And understanding it is the first step to not being swept away by it. So let's remember, knowing our survival depends on fragile systems can spark deep anxiety, okay? So The world is going to keep shifting. Those who have better understanding of what's going on in the world exert control over those who have no such knowledge, only see fragments and see no bigger picture. Knowledge isn't just power, it's sovereignty, financial, economic, mental, and even physical. And right now, most people are sleepwalking. Meanwhile, my friends, let's continue to soar like eagles, seeing the bigger picture from high above. And please, don't let kaleidoscopic world news fragments obscure your grasp of what is really going on. Subscribe to my channel and let's rise above the noise. Keep your vision clear and hold your ground while the rest of the world scrambles in the dark. That's a wrap for today. Thank you for watching Eagles View, and bye for now.